Welcome to Publitarian Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, your Tier 1 podcaster, coming to you once again with another fabulous episode. And this episode is near and dear to my heart because it's episode 12, and it's the America episode. That's right, the 4th of July is upon us, Independence Day. Happy birthday, America. But before we get into this podcast party, I just want to do a brief reading to remind everybody what this day is about.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles, and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the nation's suffrage.
Yeah, a couple hundred years ago, our brilliant founding fathers decided to start this experiment in liberty with the crazy radical idea that people should be free to govern themselves and have their big R rights that God has given to them stay with them and not regulated by government and not being squashed down by tyranny. And a couple of centuries later, this country has been a rousing success. We literally feed and clothe the world. We literally run rings around the rest of the world. Yeah, the country's got its problems, but I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Obviously, this country is near and dear to me. I'm extremely patriotic. Even growing up as a kid, I grew up in the Reagan era. Yes, that's how old I am. And even then, the mainstream media was what it was, and Reagan could do no right. He was too old. He was unfit. He was an idiot. He was going to bring us into World War III. He was a national embarrassment to us. This is what the mainstream media and the Democrats would say about him. Does it sound familiar? Is that drawing any historical parallels to where we're at now? Anyway, I'm not going to get too heavy into the politics. It's just, I've always been patriotic. Even as a kid, with Ronald Reagan at the helm, I just felt safe. And I just knew that everything was going to be all right. It's kind of strange. Because I did have a journey as a liberal Democrat, which I think a lot of college-age kids do until you get out in the real world and you start paying taxes. And you look at that first paycheck and you go, oh, crap. A lot of times that will red pill you and make you a libertarian or Republican, or in my case, a publicitarian. Yeah, I grew up in the South, and a lot of times it's not in my accent. You don't hear it, but if I'm around my people from Alabama, it'll come out pretty quick, and it just naturally flows. All I have to do is talk to a couple people, and there it is. But it's not forced. You either have to have it or you don't. But I grew up with fireworks. My dad actually worked for a fireworks company when I was a kid, and we had a basement full of fireworks. And so I've always been patriotic. I always like blowing shit up. I always like setting things on fire because, I mean, that's the most American thing you can do, is just blow things up and be proud of it. So even as a kid, even at my most liberal, I was proud of this country. I was patriotic. I liked waving that red, white, and blue flag. And I don't understand people that live in this country and say they are Americans and don't have some degree of patriotism, that do not appreciate what we have in this country. But I'm not going to get too much in the weeds about that. Let's talk about the birth of America. This idea of popular vote that we have especially came to the head again in the 2016 election. Like, what do we have the popular vote? Well, popular vote is mob rule. And the founding fathers at the birth of this country were smart enough to realize that popular vote was going to be mob rule. And I'd like to remind you guys that only 1/3 of the American colonies wanted to go to war with Britain. If we would have been popular vote, it may not have happened. This grand experiment known as America may not have happened. 1/3 thought that was a good idea, and to shake off the shackles of tyranny. So I'm glad that we are not governed by popular vote. I'm glad that the founding fathers had the foresight to know that a representative constitutional republic was the way to go. And no, people, we are not a democracy. That phrase gets bandied about a lot, but we are a representative constitutional republic. And the only flaw I really see in the system that the forefathers, I don't want to say were short-sighted on, but just could not conceive of happening, was term limits. I don't think they thought, were people living to be 40 back then? I don't think they thought people were going to be living that long. So they're like, if the congressmen keep getting voted in, why not? We can have an old senior citizen, 40-year-old living in Congress, or the Supreme Court for that matter. So you do have the golden oldies that won't go away. That's the only flaw. And with this much power and this much awesome, it's always going to bring haters. And that's with life or with anything you deal with. And that's what a lot of this boils down to. Jealousy. Haters are going to hate. They hate us because they ain't us. And that's why a lot of countries feel the way they do about America. They want to be us. They want to have the success that we have. They want to have the wealth that we have. They want to have the prosperity that we have. But they're not willing to do what it takes to get what we have, such as honoring God, such as making sacrifices, like real blood, sweat, and tear sacrifices. And it's just the same thing with class envy, like we see a lot in this country now. You have people that envy the rich or successful, but they don't see behind the scenes of what those people did to get there. And it's the same thing with this country. America is great because the people in it are great. And the great people of this country made sacrifices over the centuries to bring us to this awesome country that we have today. And talking about the founding fathers, one of those I wanted to touch on really quick was George Washington. I could do an entire podcast on George Washington, but it's funny if you look at the parallels of history versus what's happening today. Washington feared a lot of the stuff that's happening today, such as not having any political unity, he was, in his address, he was very clear about that. He was scared that politicians were going to be ruling instead of people. He said in one of his farewell addresses and his writings, make sure that the people are the ones doing the governing and not being governed. He was also scared of the political divide that would happen between political parties. A lot of the things that he had concerns about that he thought the American people should address. Here we are years later, and it's happening. But this man was a badass. He was like the original America. We're talking about, crossing icy rivers with soldiers that didn't have shoes, that were leaving blood tracks in the snow. Just like these beaten down but hardened and salty individuals that cared so much about their freedom and their liberty that they were willing to sacrifice everything. And it's fashionable in today's modern pseudo-history to downplay Washington and the Founding Fathers. A big talking point you hear about them is that they were all slave owners. Fun fact about George Washington: he wanted slavery to end. This is his own words. In his will, he actually provided emancipation of his slaves, along with some level of education and training, so that they might be able to function as free men and make their way in the world. I think a lot of the Founding Fathers saw slavery as an institution that was already upon us and already happening, and I think they laid the groundwork early on to get rid of that. You can look in a lot of the Founding Fathers' writings, and they all share the same sentiment. I'm also going to do a podcast about Lincoln and where he really stood on slavery. That would be very surprising to you guys. But enough of that. I'm getting back into the celebratory stuff about America. Like I said before, the haters are going to hate. They hate us because they ain't us. So let's talk about 10 things that America has done, that America has accomplished. Number 10, the internet, circa 1985. Although no official opening date exists, the internet was an American concept actually put forth by the U.S. government in the 1960s, interlinking thousands of public and private computer and communication systems. That's crazy, right? That American entrepreneurship would birth something like this. And who doesn't use the internet now? Well, good and bad. It's like one of my famous quotes that I always attribute to myself is, the good thing about the internet is that it gives everybody a voice. And the bad thing about the internet is that it gives everyone a voice. Number 9, cell phones. 1973. Did you realize a cell phone was that old? I know the cell phone technology, the idea of cellular technology, goes all the way back to Tesla even. America, by the way. And it was supposed to be, if I remember my readings, like this government way of communication, and then it ended up being privatized. And of course, when you make something privatized, we make it awesome and we make it affordable for everybody. And boom, there it is. Number 8, machine guns. Yes. 1862, 1884. One of those two dates, it's kind of conflicted on what date it actually originated, but yeah, machine guns. Dr. Gatling invented his hand-cranked multi-barrel gun in time for limited use during the Civil War, and his guns were still in service until 1911. There was also a revolver that was used in the Revolutionary War as well. And the liberals like to come at you and say, well, the Second Amendment was talking about muskets. No, we had multi-fired revolvers in the Revolutionary War as well. Oh, and Under PC is starting. Apparently I didn't kill that track. Hold on. God, BBC. Alright, anyway, back to it. Oh, geez, the Panama Canal, 1914. That's number 7. A project that dwarfed the problems in building the Suez Canal or any other canal. The U.S. accomplished what the French could not. That's right, America, Frenchy French. And provided easy access between the Atlantic and the Pacific. Number 6, the modern submarine. Invented by John Holland, an Irish-American who sold his idea to the U.S. Navy, which commissioned their first submarine. Dude, badass. Number 5, transoceanic cable communication, 1858. American Cyrus Westfield masterminded the massive project of laying a telegraph cable from North America to Europe, producing the first, that's right, baby, transatlantic electronic communication, featuring a message between Queen Victoria and President Buchanan. Number 4, the first nuclear reactor, 1942. And the hippies and conservatives can bat this back and forth, but hey man, if there's nuclear energy to have, I want us to have it, America. Nuclear energy is really good for producing power, and contrary to popular belief, it's actually cheap and affordable and clean and reliable. Yeah, the whole Chernobyl thing, but have we had that problem in America? Nope. Number 3, the Model T Ford, 1908. What is more freaking American than American muscle? Steel put together to make horseless carriages. This revolutionary thing of 4 wheels replacing the horse and pioneering that sense of American freedom and independence on the open road in the 20th century. And number 2, this is a good one. First in flight, you guys know about this. The Wright brothers, 1903. Many inventors around the world were working on controlled, powered manned flight projects, but the Wright brothers from Ohio were the first to make it reality. Unfortunately, they also invented the airplane crash fatality, but hey, omelets and eggs, you know how that goes. And then the number 1, oh my gosh, the most America thing. Men on the Moon, 1969. Kennedy was like, hey, here's what we're going to do. And we did it. The U.S. moon landing in 1969 and subsequent lunar forays made the U.S. not only the first to the moon, but also the only country to ever accomplish a manned moon landing. The Apollo program also provided some really neat photography. Yeah, it did. And F you guys and your moon landing is staged bullcrap. If you believe that, you probably also believe that the earth is flat. Fuck out of here with that. Just remember about that moon landing. If someone else from another country tries to give you beef as an American and say, hey, our country does this or our country does that, just simply remind them that there are 2 types of countries in this world. Those that use the metric system and those that have gone to the freaking moon. And I think that will do it for me, ladies and gentlemen. You can't get more American than that. Go out there and celebrate. Remember the founding of this country. Remember the birthday. Open up a cold one if you're 21, and then only if you're 21. And then if you are going to do that, enjoy responsibly. Anyway, go blow some shit up. Go say the Pledge of Allegiance. Put up your flags. And enjoy this great country that God, the Creator, has given to us, America. Thanks for listening, you guys.